about some of the war refugees and the defectors that we still see today. So I'll just talk about facts and how South Koreans are actually viewing about this current situation of having the North Korean defectors, and some stories that I have found as I was researching and how I think about this issue. So because of the war, I guess like they started having refugees before the war, during the war, and also after the war. And it was kind of hard to find the exact statistic. And so I gathered about like 1 million to 2.5 million people were war refugees. And as of 2008, there are over 1.2 million separated families in South Korea and North Korea. Well, I guess more South Korea. And down here in the graph, it shows the number of the North Korean defectors coming into the South Korea. And it's kind of crazy to see how the number just like exploded after like 2000. And I think at the beginning, like in 1990s, a lot of North Korean spies were disguising as the defector and trying to get into the South Korea to get information out of them and stuff like that. So they didn't allow a lot of people into South Korea. But then as the time went by, I think also North Korea like realized that the communism isn't really working, and many people started to get out. And there are actually more people like in China and whatnot that are not successful getting into the South Korea. And here's some details of the number. And it's kind of interesting because there are way more women getting into South Korea than male. And I couldn't figure out why. But yeah, it's over, like about 70% are women. So I researched on how Korean people are viewing this issue. Obviously, the separated family, people kind of feel sympathy towards them because it's not just someone else's story. It's my grandparents' story, like your neighbor's grandparents' story. So they get really moved by these shows, and they started this video letter to families. So South Koreans will tape themselves and just, I don't know, record letters to the people left in North Korea. And here's another program that started in February of this year, Sing 3040. So they're playing songs that were sang by the Korean people before the war, so kind of bring back the spirit of unification. And I don't know if you know, they were actually physical reunion of the families throughout the year. So in 1983, the original plan was just to help people find their separated family just within these 3 hours right here. But then they were like, it exploded. People just came to Seoul to post their stories to find their family members, and they ended up having over 50,000 people come and participate. So they ended up just having this program run a little longer, so from 3 hours to 5 days long. And the result was 500 people were able to be reunited. And here are some of the actual physical reunion took place between North Korea and South Korea. There's one in 1985. I think it was like right after that they ran the 1983 program. They were able to have this visit. And starting in 2000, they had consistent visits, but then like obviously now, like it's not happening anymore. And with the advanced technology, they were able to do the conference call type of reunion. And here's some pictures. So right here, this is the video reunion where they're just talking and bowing down to their grandpa and dad or uncle. And this one was kind of interesting because it's a mother and a daughter. Like they didn't know if they were alive or not for over 6 years. And now they're meeting. Like you wouldn't be able to like recognize each other. So it's, I don't know, whenever I see this, like I just cry. Because my grandparents also went through the same thing. And there are lots of movies, and this is how you can tell the Korean people feel sympathy towards the separated family. I watched Gyeonggi this one. It's like crossing the border. And this one's pretty popular one, talking about two brothers. But I don't think it's based on true stories. So. But it's just people, I don't know, people get moved by these stories. So now I'm switching gears to the defectors. So instead of calling Korean defectors, they came up with a new word called subhemi. It's more friendly to them because defector might be like a little offensive to the people who got out of North Korea. So because of the cultural differences and economic differences, they need a lot of help because they usually come into Korea with like basically nothing. So the government and private organizations provide these classes for them to adapt to this new culture. And here are some stories. This is the highlight of my presentation. So 1948. This is the story of my grandma. So this is my grandma right here. She was only 14. This is my great-grandpa. By the way, I didn't find out about this till like a couple months ago. It's a crazy story. So he ended up joining, they all lived like right here, Yonghwang-do area. So he joined Freedom Party, which supported South Korean government. And this one member of the Freedom Party guy had a list of all the joined members and like tried to go down to South to report. But then that guy was discovered by a Russian guy. So everybody who was on the list got arrested. So my grandpa actually ended up way up there where there's a coal mine. So instead of killing these people, the North Korean government decided to just use them as a free labor till they die. So I heard that my great-grandpa died in that mine. No one gets out once you get in there. So when he was arrested, my great-grandma, she was scared for her family. Because like in Korea, once one of your family members arrested, like the entire family would be moved to the prison camp. And generations after generations, that crime just stayed the whole family line. So here's the oldest son and oldest daughter. So instead of sending them out to get like more information because it was too dangerous, he would get forced to the Red Army and she would get raped or whatever. It was too risky for them. So she ended up sending my grandma, who was 14, and the youngest son, who was 6 at the time, to go near this, to find the ship. So they're pretty wealthy in the north. So they ended up like, my grandma said she traveled and traveled. Sometimes they had to stop at their relative's house along the way because it was just so far. So my grandma passed away about 2 years ago, and even before she died, this is when my mom found out about this story. Like she told the story, and she said that was the hardest moment of her life, like scariest, the hardest, and she hated her mother for it. But later she realized she risked her life to protect the older siblings, and she was kind of bitter about that. But anyway, they were able to get the ship, and the entire family, except for my great-grandpa, were able to move down to South before the World War. So it's kind of rare. They were really lucky that the whole family was saved, and there was no separations between the family. And here's another miracle that happened in 1950 during the war. So they were having evacuation in, I think it's like Finland, it's called. So there was a ship called Meredith Victory, and it's just a ship that, they just move like supplies and equipment and whatnot. But these two people right here, he was the captain. His last name is LaRue, and I believe he was the commander, Alman. They made an executive decision to unload all the supplies in the ship. So the ship was originally built to carry just 12 other passengers other than the original crew members, but they just ended up unloading everything that was on the ship and then transported 14,000 North Korean people down to the south. Amazing, right? And here's a little fun fact. During their journey to the south, there were 5 babies that were born on the ship. And this is about my grandpa's story. So he also lived in the north. The air right here. So when the war broke, the Danish boys were in danger. They didn't want to join to North Korea. So my grandpa, he and his father with 3 younger brothers, they decided to get down to the south. and they were gonna come back and take their mother and the twin little brothers. He had two twin brothers. So they thought it was just gonna be temporary, seeking for safety and whatnot. So the 4 boys, they ended up going to the train station. They hopped on the train on top of, and they just like hung on to the top to get to the south. Like instead of getting tickets or anything, they were just like on the top like this. And they all got separated during that time. So somehow he ended up in Seoul, and then he joined the South Korean army later on and fought during the war, and he was lucky enough to not get killed. But here's like one crazy fact. So before they hopped on the train, they used to live in this like dark hole, basically, so they wouldn't get discovered by the North people. And he also washed his face with the red pepper powder, so he would look like he had pink eyes, so they wouldn't take him away. So it's like crazy, and he's coming to United States like the end of this year. I'm hoping to get him to talk more about it, but he doesn't like to talk about it, so we need to like get him a job or something. Time's running out. But here's about the defectors. So this map shows how the defectors usually get out of North Korea. So crossing the border between North Korea and South Korea is basically, I don't know, you want to die, because like once you're discovered, North and South, they're going to both shoot you, so you're going to die. So the safest way to get out through the China, and it's really difficult to make it back, because like if you get discovered while you're living in China, you get sent back, and I don't know what happens. Like your whole family will be moved to like the prison camp, and they're basically risking their life. And there's one guy, story of one guy, he didn't want to like show his face, but he said he knew running away from North Korea was jeopardizing his family's fate too. But he was the only one who got out of North Korea, so he doesn't know what happened to his family. He has an idea, but he didn't want to talk about it, like it's a sensitive subject. So a lot of people get out of North Korea because of the poverty and the danger. But I think recently, because of the whole media, like people actually hear about the differences between the North Korean culture and the outside world. So I think they seek for freedom there. And in South Korean people, I don't know, it's a debate. It's a hot topic right now because they get taxed more to help these defectors, because they come in without like anything. But I think it's important to just like remember